inadequate food are growing daily. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala.
Staying with the refugee situation in South Sudan, internally displaced persons have decried the worsening hunger situation in the country. Many have been forced to flee their homes due to fighting coupled with flooding. CGTN's Joy Karuki Juma reports on the humanitarian situation.
18-year-old Adeng Loporonget is expecting her first child. She is worried. Her family and neighbors were victims of an attack in 2020. They were forced to flee. She says her parents decided to marry her off in order to get dowry to survive.
I
was still young when I left my parents' home. I moved to my husband's house and now I am pregnant. We have been struggling ever since. We lost everything in conflict.
Civil war in South Sudan erupted soon after seceding from Sudan in 2011. Nearly 400,000 people died, and the worst refugee crisis on the continent since the Rwanda genocide. The oil-rich nation is still racked by violence. In 2020, the situation was made worse by the floods that the UN described as the worst rains in living memory. Homes and crops were destroyed in nearly half of the country's 78 counties. Loporonget now lives with her husband and 4 members of the extended family in an informal settlement. The family depends on food rations they receive.
Our enemies are always attacking us. We really suffer a lot. We are always on the run. They kidnap our people, mostly women and children. Now our area is empty. We lost our food during the floods and now we face hunger. I hope this war stops and we are able to go back to normal life. I want to go home and start cultivating our land and prepare to raise my family.
Sadly, Loporonget and her family may not return home soon. A UN report says that authorities have blocked humanitarian access to conflict areas. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Many asylum seekers in Libya suffer human rights abuses during their time in detention centers. However, their hopes for a better future are now being renewed through Rwanda's emergency transit mechanism. Displaced persons can now find safety at a facility in Gashora after being evacuated from Libya.
When Hadia was born, her parents were in a detention center in Libya. The family was evacuated to Rwanda's emergency transit facility in Gashora when she was 2 months old. Hadia's family were among the first group of asylum seekers evacuated in 2019.
In my country, so we have no choice.
Some refugees are processed for integration into Rwandan society or resettled elsewhere. They are also given the option of returning to countries where they were previously granted asylum. If they choose to, and if it is safe to do so, they can also return home. In the meantime, refugees can live and work amongst their host communities.
We had heard about this country and that it was secure and not like Libya. When most people go to Libya, they are worried about being in detention and whether or not they will have freedom.
During a 3-day visit to Rwanda, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, visited the Gashora facility.
I spoke to a family from Somalia. Many of them have harrowing stories of abuse, of torture even, of long detention, of uncertainty, of despair. And this is a time when they can also try to overcome some of that trauma.
The emergency transit mechanism in Rwanda is an agreement between the government, the UN Refugee Agency, and the African Union. The mechanism targets refugees most at risk in Libya. Since the first evacuation, more than 500 refugees and asylum seekers have been moved to the transit center. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
The news continues on Africa Live. Time now for our business segment. It's over to you, Uche.
Thanks again, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca reports better than expected results for the first quarter of 2021. And no more air traffic controllers at London's City Airport.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca says its COVID-19 vaccine has contributed $275 million in sales for the first quarter of 2021. Now, this comes after the drug maker reported better than expected results and sales growth. The company adds that it will not make a profit from the shot during the pandemic. Sales in Europe were $224 million. Emerging market sales were $43 million and $8 million for the rest of the world. Now, total revenue, which includes payments from collaborations, rose 11% to $7.3 billion for the 3 months to March. Core earnings trimmed off 3 cents per share to stand at a $1.63 per share. Meanwhile, in the UK, London City Airport has gone public with its move to switch to a remote digital tower. This marks the world's first major international airport to make that switch. Now, City's planes now take off and land guided by air traffic controllers who are based 90 miles away. They direct the airport using information from a newly built taller control tower stacked with 16 high-definition cameras and multiple sensors. City Airport's Chief Operating Officer Alison Fitzgerald says despite the move aiming to combat the coronavirus pandemic, concerns continue to loom over the decision. She also added that with the new technology, City's current number of controllers will be able to handle more plane movements. Once flying recovers after the pandemic, City will be able to handle 45 plane movements per hour. That's up from 40 in 2019.
So fundamentally, the job hasn't changed. It's still about the controller's eyes finding the aircraft and monitoring it visually. The difference is we're using screens instead of windows.
So we think that the digital tower is going to revolutionise how we can deliver airport services. So it allows us to reproduce what we do today. It allows us to further enhance that job, and potentially allows us to group together different airports in one place and present different ways of efficiently delivering the service to the airport customer. So it really is the tip of the iceberg of improvement to what we can do for the airport ATC.
Now, the Ethiopian Ministry of Education has partnered with a global blockchain company to digitize various aspects of its operations. The system will allow authorities to remotely monitor the performance of thousands of schools. Here's CGTN's Daniela Pearson bringing us those details.
A blockchain is a database that is shared across a network of computers. An initiative by Ethiopia's Education Ministry will use it to digitize record keeping and help allocate resources, among other tasks.
Here in Ethiopia, we've just signed our first major deal to implement a digital identity solution across Ethiopia's education sector for an initial pilot of 5 million users. So we think this is probably the largest blockchain implementation done, and the beauty of it for us is how extensible it is. We're starting off in the high school education layer, but following that, we'll be looking to also expand into higher education as well.
Once a record has been added to the blockchain, it is very difficult to change. IOHK's proprietary blockchain allows educationalists to monitor records like class attendance, schedules and grades.
So the first deployment we are envisioning is for all my secondary schools plus all my teachers in the country. So that's a bit more than 5 million. So with this 5 million data, digital ID driven, then blockchain driven, performance analytics driven, real-time data driven. So at least I would, as Minister of Education, I would be able to locate exactly where, for example, very good students are in mathematics or in physics or in chemistry.
Blockchains were previously used to support cybercurrencies like Bitcoin and Ether. However, many other possible uses are now emerging.
On the education perspective, one of the things that people struggle with is proving that they've actually achieved the degrees and the grades which they say they have. It's quite easy to falsify a university certificate, and you see these kind of issues crop up with people claiming to have done things that they haven't. This new form of identity would enable you to share a single link to an employer. You could click on it and then follow through, blockchain verified, to be able to follow through on the blockchain, the verifications that you've actually achieved what you said you have. So we think this will also be important for employers, and hopefully should be able to drive future growth in the employment market.
Some tech experts believe the relatively low inputs that blockchains require make them ideal for speeding up the provision and improvement of services in developing countries. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Meanwhile, South Africa's post-COVID-19 economic reconstruction and recovery plan includes a green economy component. The circular economy is a key aspect of that plan and will focus on ensuring environmental protection and the sustainable use of the country's natural resources. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more.
The country's environment minister says the plan promotes waste recycling, renewable energy generation, revitalizing the ecotourism and forestry sectors, and retrofitting government buildings to improve climate resilience and save on water and energy consumption.
We are running out of resources, are not finite, so we need to make the best use of it as far as possible. And on the other end, disposal sites are few and far between, and it's becoming more and more costly and onerous to actually operate them, run with them, and send materials to disposal sites. And we're losing a lot of value and good sense out of products that's being manufactured.
Government efforts are focused on decreasing plastic waste and increasing the recycling of plastics.
Recycling itself has not quite worked as what it was expected to do. And hence, recycling is not out of the circular economy, but it's actually on the outermost loop of it. So we need to get the best sort of use of products that are manufactured, whether it's locally, internationally, or wherever.
There's been lots of discussion amongst analysts about the circular economy and its possible impact on South Africa's economic growth. But it needs a catalyst.
And one of the key things that's coming to the fore now is actually the extended producer responsibility legislation that's coming to the fore as recent as the 5th of May of 2021. And that will actually become mandatory on any sort of packaging producer or anyone that imports it, to actually ensure that they actually take care of any sort of products that is brought in, and that there would be a levy that needs to be paid onto it to ensure that there's better collection of the material and better use of it once it has seen its sort of end of life as such.
Moving to the circular economy is not going to be a straightforward exercise. It's an ongoing project.
It's still very much a document under discussion. There would obviously be areas of, let's say some industries would be a lot harder hit in terms of being able to need to change to it because of vested interest that may be there. But if one takes the holistic picture in terms of what needs to be done, then yes, it's a much needed initiative that needs to be followed through.
Saving the planet is everybody's responsibility and everybody has to get involved. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And a year since COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic, Tunisia's tourism sector is still reeling from the crisis. Now, the tourism-dependent economy saw revenues plunge by 65% last year. As Adnan Shaushina reports, authorities have recently announced they will ease measures in an attempt to bring tourists back to the North African nation.
Global travel bans and restrictions imposed by countries due to outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic left the tourism and aviation industries facing an unprecedented crisis. The Tunisian economy shrank 8.8% last year, the largest contraction in the country's history, due to the effects of the crisis on vital sectors such as tourism, aviation and export. Players have now come up with a raft of measures that ease movement, eliminates quarantines and removal of curfews to attract tourists back to the country.
I've convinced a group of friends to visit Tunisia because the preventative measures are strict and the health protocol is respected. Now we can travel safely and visit any region of the country. The lockdown and travel bans have devastated the tourism and aviation sectors. I'm promoting the Tunisian destination. It's a personal initiative.
A group of independent businessmen and associations have set up a $2.8 million interest-free fund for the benefit of successful tourism professionals. This network is financing and supporting 500 entrepreneurs in the sustainable tourism, handicraft and heritage sectors during the COVID-19 crisis.
The loans will encourage youths to rely on themselves to create their own projects in the tourism and handicraft sectors. The importance of this kind of project is it's creating jobs and boosting development in the interior regions. Local initiatives are helpful during the pandemic because they support the state effort.
The Tunisian National Tourist Office, the Tunisian Hotel Trade Federation and the Tunisian Federation of Travel and Tourism Agencies have signed an agreement aimed at promoting local tourism. Industry professionals are launching this initiative to build tourism, which has been heavily impacted by the COVID-induced economic uncertainty.
I've invested in a tourist resort in a mountainous area during the pandemic, and I'm still confident. Domestic tourism will be the priority. Seaside tourism will also go through upgrading so as to diversify products, offers and services to attract international travelers. I've created 10 jobs this year. I believe in solidarity and social economy to overcome the crisis.
According to the aviation and tourism departments, the Tunisian government seeks to diversify the Tunisian tourism offer during and after the pandemic. Authorities aim to create synergies between the tourism, handicrafts, local products, and cultural heritage sectors. The World Tourism Organization expects the tourism industry to rebound within 2 to 4 years. This vital industry contributes about 10% of Tunisia's GDP. Tunisian authorities are hopeful that both the tourism and airline industries will recover from COVID-19 within 2 years. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, Tanzania to conclude an agreement for a $30 billion liquefied natural gas project in about 6 months. We'll have the details on that, all that at the top of the hour. For now, back to Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. You are watching Africa Live. So much more to get to, including One International Jazz Day. We look at the rising popularity of the genre among Ugandans.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Africa Live. I appreciate your company. I'm Richard Nta. South Africa's first all-female firefighting team has become an inspiration to young women all over the country. The Juliet crew fought alongside 300 other fighters and rescue workers to bring under control a devastating blaze on the slopes of Cape Town's Table Mountain just over a week ago. CGTN's Julie Shire spent some time with these trailblazing heroes. Let's take a look.
It takes guts and grit to confront a raging fire, traits the women of the Juliet crew do not lack.
It is very dangerous, especially when you are unfit to do the job. When we go to the fire lines, we find different hazards there, but you have to be very careful. You have to watch out where you're going, because hazards are all over and they're very dangerous on the fire line, like falling trees, rolling materials like rolling stones.
The team was formed 5 years ago to address the underrepresentation of women in the fire service.
Taking kids that are vulnerable for the Cape Flats, putting through a program, teaching them to be firefighters, and then putting them back into the community to talk about fire, and then go and give some payback to Western Cape government that has paid them to get this far, and now they go fight fires on their behalf.
The crew battle major fires around the Western Cape, which are common during the hot and dry summers. Most recently, they joined close to 300 rescue workers on the slopes of Table Mountain.
On the first day, we spent 24 hours. It was a blazing flames on that day. The wind speed was too much, and then it was changing direction all the time. So it made it difficult for us to fight that fire. But we managed. It took us long to do it, because on the following day, at least the wind was cooled down. Then we managed to put down the fire.
It shows them that women are strong, not only physically, but mentally. And this job comes with a lot of emotions, and I think we do our best, and we just inspire the young ladies to try and follow their dreams, no matter how crazy it may seem for other people. And we all, the whole crew, we come from disadvantaged backgrounds.
It is very important to change the stereotypes from where we come from, communities not understanding women with their abilities and stuff. So it has changed my life in the sense that as humble as I am, sometimes I have to just stay out of the comfort zone, knowing how to work hand in hand with others.
One of the city's very first female fighters now commands 8 stations.
I'm very proud to be in this position. It was a lot of hard work and dedication and commitment. Being one of the first female firefighters and progressing through the ranks, it is quite difficult.
These crews of women stand brave and tall alongside their male counterparts as some of Cape Town's best emergency personnel. They're also paving the way for generations of young female firefighters to come. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
In Uganda, jazz has become more popular in recent years. A sizable number of musicians are now venturing into the genre, and that has helped build jazz's popularity in the country. Leon Sinyenge reports.
Ugandan jazz is buzzing. Thanks to musicians like Michael Ouma, a guitarist, and saxophonist Joseph Chizito. The two are some of the younger generation of musicians keeping the genre going.
Jazz gives us an opportunity to express ourselves, because it's a genre of music where you're not boxed up or like following lots of rules. You express yourself.
These musicians have infused their style with the contemporary songs Ugandans listen to.
Getting like the songs they know and trying to do renditions with instruments. So in that way, someone gets to listen to something they are familiar with and they can sing along to it. So over us, like to get nearer to the hearts of the people.
Before the coronavirus pandemic, the capital, Kampala's nightlife was often painted with jazz-themed nights. The breakthrough for jazz began almost 20 years ago here.
At the time, 2004, there were no live bands in Uganda. Most of the players were either in church, and that was it, using CDs. Artists using CDs, which is terrible. So when we started doing jazz evenings, then it became a festival.
Jazz now has a dedicated core of musicians, but it is yet to dominate the local music spaces. Mayanja says that may take some time.